Hello Warfighters, war is hell. It is time for what is going to be the first video of the new year. And what I like to do for this is kind of talk about what had happened the previous year and what you can expect for the year ahead. This is really good for me because it gives me a chance to kind of think about where I am, where I want to go, and what kind of brought me up to this point. And I like to be able to share this with you. So in this video, I'm going to ask you guys some questions. So in the comment section below, if you can just write your answers, give as much information as you can. That's the best way for me to be able to gather your feedback and various data points on some of the things I'm going to ask. You guys have done a great job in the past of providing me good information about what you're wanting to see, what I'm doing right, what I'm not, and it kind of helps me to be able to see if what I'm thinking matches what you guys are all thinking. So if you can do that, please do. Questions throughout the entire video, so please try and stay through it as long as you can. One of the things that I always do for these two is I have very little notes. I like the whole impromptu fashion of being able to put this together, because sometimes as I'm doing this and I'm saying some of the stuff out loud, some ideas will come to the forefront that I can then share with you guys and stuff like that. So anyway, let's start off with the positive stuff, what you guys can see or what you can expect for 2020. Now, last year I did a top 5 things that you will expect to see. I'm not necessarily going to go with that, and I'll explain more as I talk a little bit about the 2019 in review. But I think for 2020, one of the things that I want to do is kind of get back to story-based content. That is kind of the root of how I set this up. When I first made the channel, there was really 2 series that I ended up doing. There was the alternate history, and then I would play random missions out of the Steam Workshop for Arma 3. I would rate them just so you guys could, decide, hey, is this a good mission to get? And it also added some diversity to the content that you saw in here. I don't know if I'll necessarily go back to just playing a whole bunch of Steam games, or sorry, not Steam games, but Steam missions for Arma 3. But I think what I'm going to do is kind of stick with what is good at making a story. Now, a lot of that, though, might not necessarily be Arma, which is another point that I had on here, is maybe testing some stuff. It might be a little bit different from Arma, but you still have that story-based, episodic type of content. I know I've experimented with some stuff over the past year, like Ace Combat 7. I played a couple missions out of that. Same thing with Sniper Elite when that was remastered. I did a episode pretty recently with Total War. I've done War Game. The thing is none of those have really gained a lot of traction. I think it's because of the fact that some of these games are not necessarily ones that people are looking for, but it's also not necessarily too story based. So I still want to try and come up with something, and that story based type of content might be along the lines of and I'm just kind of sharing with you some of the things that's going through my mind, and this is the stuff I'd like to get your feedback on for the first question. Is there anything here that you'd like to see? But using Total War to develop an alternate history scenario where it's all multiplayer, kind of lay out battles and try and put together just kind of a story for it. So, for example, a invasion of the Iberian Peninsula in 1212. Kind of see how that would go, or a 10th Crusade, or there's a lot of different things that I could theoretically do with that game, and it could also be different. Having people who would play against me, and each battle would kind of impact the overall story and stuff like that. I mean, that's something that I think would be kind of cool, and I'm kind of testing that out a little bit, or I have been testing it a little bit. Also, another thing is Star Citizen. That's something I'm going to be posting here in the next week. You guys can kind of get an idea of what that's like, but really developing a character and kind of going through it. Pretty similar to what I did with the TRGM 2 campaign, where I basically would play out these missions and tie it together with a story. Some people really like that. Again, didn't gain too much traction, but I'll kind of go into why I don't think that necessarily was the case in a little bit. So that's some of the things that I want to do. I also kind of want to redo a lot of the things with the channel itself as far as its appearance. So I want to redo the layout of the channel, create a new trailer for the channel, stuff like that. I don't know if that's necessarily a big deal to you guys, but it is for me. And also working on Patreon and trying to get that updated and make it something that is more appealing for people to be able to help support me through Patreon. Those are my big goals for 2020. There is one more that I'll talk about just a little bit after I go over 2019. But I am looking forward to what we're going to have over the next year on this channel. This is something I'm still heavily invested in, and I enjoy making a lot of the content that's on here. And I think I'm in a better position this year to kind of do it and be successful than I was last year. Because as we go into 2019, this is kind of like the down stuff. 2019 was a pretty rough year for me when it comes to YouTube. And I think a lot of that is just kind of exemplified what's happened over the last few months. For the first part, I came down with pneumonia and I was out for a number of weeks. Pneumonia and YouTube is does not mix well. One of the things with pneumonia, is you guys probably know, fluid in your lungs. So as I'm doing something like this, using my voice, trying to breathe strategically, doesn't work well. So that took me out for quite a while, and I've obviously seen a drop in views since having pneumonia. That's one of the things YouTube will kind of knock you for, is if you don't post for a while, they'll be less likely to show your videos when you start coming back. Like, you have to basically pay for the same real estate twice, with real estate being where your videos show up in different categories. I also had a really, really rough final season. There was a class that I was really, really worried that I wasn't going to be able to get a good grade on. I won't go into the specifics of it just because I know you guys don't care, but it was nuts. Like, I had to go to the department chair on how this class was being taught and how miserable it was by a number of different students. They had to kind of submit some information. I came away with an A, which, is good, but it was weird. Anyway, so finals took me out for a couple weeks too, as I was literally studying every minute of the day. That I didn't have something higher priority going on. Another big thing that made 2019 rough, and this is something that you guys never see, is the changes to the YouTube algorithm. This is something that just about every Arma YouTuber will be able to kind of share with you some of the struggles that we have with producing content. YouTube is difficult enough as it is because of just the sheer saturation of the amount of content creators that are on the platform. It's very difficult to grow your channel, to kind of be out there and have new people find you. But some of the things that have been done to the YouTube algorithm make it very difficult for our type of content to be created without getting demonetized. And that demonetization is just absolutely painful for us. The way that it works is usually in the first 72 hours, 48, even more so, 48 hours after a video comes out, that's like your prime time on when you're going to be getting views, because you've got notifications that are popping in. It is new content, so that might be something that draws more people to be able to view your video. But I know in my case, usually within about 10 minutes of me posting something, a lot of times a video will get demonetized. And when a video has been demonetized, it's not something that is spread out as widely. Like, it won't search as high in search results, and you really see a major difference in views in that first 48 to 72 hours between videos that are demonetized and those that are receiving monetization. And a lot of it, as I mentioned, is because of the content that we make, where we talk about things like military conflict and war, and I'm probably going to get even this demonetized because I'm talking about this and using some of the keywords, which you can get penalized for. I mean, for example, I can't in any of my videos anymore put World War II, because World War II will be something that will lead or be one of the things that it looks for towards demonetization. I think there's like a strike 3 rule. And so I've been joking around with some people that, what some YouTubers are doing is, instead of World War II, putting the second global conflict, or, something like that, just to try and do it, which, for my channel, that was a bad choice. But anyway, but changes to the YouTube algorithm, it really, really has hurt the channel. Like, you look even over the previous few years, the amount of views per subscribers was higher than what I have now. But over all the Arma YouTubers, that's a pretty common thing. There's still growth that's happening, don't get me wrong, and I am happy about that. It's just not to the growth that I had seen previously. And so that's kind of what has kind of gotten me down a little bit. I'm pretty fortunate that I do this for a hobby, so I have realistic expectations for what the channel is going to be, how much money I'm going to make, stuff like that. But it's still frustrating to know that there's something completely out of my control that is preventing me from being able to grow the channel as much as I personally would like, and for the different goals that I have. So other things that contributed to 2019 that weren't necessarily that great is, as I mentioned last year, I did top 5 things that you're going to see in the channel this year. I'd set a lot of goals. Most of those were not met. For example, I had a decrease in Patreon funding when my goal was to increase. And I will admit, so one of the things that I do if I see somebody has removed their Patreon support, I shouldn't say I do this with everybody, but with a lot of people, I'll be like, hey, I'll shoot them a message and just say, hey, thanks for the support. It really means a lot. I'm glad that you found my channel worthy of your support. And I'll get, some information back in a lot of cases about, hey, here's what's going on. And I never want to put anybody in a situation where there's financial problems that they have to deal with on my account. They choose to support me over doing something with their family or whatever it may be. And that's what a majority of the losses had come from, was just personal financial, issues. And I definitely want to support, a lot of my friends who do support me through Patreon. But, seeing the major drop, and especially over the last couple months, that was something that was kind of hard for me. And that's one of the reasons why I do want to rework Patreon. So I do want to ask you guys, this is another thing I'd like to see in the comment section, is what would you want to see out of Patreon? I've done some things like, offer shout outs in videos. I've, posted full episodes of missions that I've done, because I know some people would want to see how everything plays out. But looking at those videos, they don't get a lot of draws. And so I'm curious, what would be beneficial for you? What would make you want to be able to support me beyond the fact that it's really the primary way that I earn any type of revenue on this channel? Because again, demonetization hits me really, really hard. Another thing with 2019, alternate history was pretty slow to release. We had the second Soviet Civil War. We had the Soviet Civil War. And then I'm currently doing the Iran War, which is really timely considering everything that's going on. And just as a side note, if things were to really start breaking out, I don't know if I would continue with that series. But anyway, that's just something that popped into my head here. But one of the reasons why alternate history was pretty slow to release is because I'm now having the issue of trying to be a perfectionist as I make these missions. I go back and I read some of the comments, and it's like, hey, you should have done this, or you did this wrong, or it would be cool if you would do this. And I care about your guys' feedback. That's one of the reasons why I'm soliciting it right here in this video. But as I start to see trends, I want to do better and better in the type of content that I make and in the missions. And so I've noticed that I've started doing things that I don't think anybody's ever going to notice, or I spend more time doing something really doesn't impact the mission too much. So in the sniper one that I did not that long ago, I had to spend a lot of time trying to find a way to be able to get the Humvees to fire on a position, and I just run past them for 5 seconds. You hear all the fire going on in the background, but I spent a lot of time getting it set up, making sure that all of the hostile AI were in the right position to be able to trigger them. Played around with what their accuracy was, so that way there would be enough guys for me to take out, but at the same time it wasn't obvious that they were completely missing. Anyway, it's this type of perfection stuff that I think is really drawing out the time that it takes for me to be able to make these alternate history videos, and that has kind of been an issue. I think another thing that's kind of made alternate history pretty hard is the types of stories that I were telling, or that I have been telling, are a little bit different. You look at Operation Unthinkable, which I stand by is probably the most successful one that I've had. And that, you have this giant map, there's progression taking place with territory from mission to mission. There's very clear cause and effect on what's going on. Soviet Civil War, you didn't have that. That's something that stretched out over 3 weeks, I think, maybe even 2. And at that point, you're not going to have like set lines of control in there. And you're not even going to have, the opportunity where everybody's going to have different uniforms to make it very clear, hey, this is what side you're on and stuff like that. It was a very different story. And I feel like even what we're doing in Iran right now with this alternate history series, I'm still kind of at the point where there's not necessarily much that I can say as far as territory goes. One of the things I really wanted to explore at the beginning was just how much of an escalation, how widespread such a conflict would be. So I made the Israeli Defense Force mission. I made the raid by the SAS. All these different things that haven't necessarily gone into the type of warfare where you have this grand map and you see lines advancing. That's something that it's going to come down the road. But with the research that I've done about what war with Iran would look like, that's not something that would be easily done right away. I know, for example, and I do this, right? I explained this in a couple videos, which you can view in the introductory video on it. It just talks about the amount of personnel that some experts say would need to, or we would need to be able to successfully occupy and invade Iran. It's more than what we have active duty personnel right now. And even if you throw all the personnel, it might not be enough. So there's a likelihood that there'd be a draft. Well, I mean, I obviously cannot, just start off by saying that there's a draft and have everybody in their full force in 2 weeks. I've got to stretch this out. But with this different type of story content, here's another question. I mean, are you liking these last 2 series? Do I need to try and go back to, hey, here's where the lines of progression are because of the outcome of this mission? We were able to advance the line, things like that. So that would be very, very helpful for me. I obviously am going to try to be more frequent with it because I know that is probably the series more people look towards. And as I kind of talk about a future, another point here, you guys will probably understand I might have more time to be able to make some of that, and you'll kind of see stuff quicker. But I really, really, really need to work on not being a perfectionist when it comes to this stuff. That's taking so much more time to make a mission than I think what really needs to be done. And it is far more than what I had done in the past. And that's the biggest contributor to why it does not come out as much as it used to. I mean, which was really once a week, every Sunday. It was like clockwork, but that has definitely not been the case over the past couple series. As I mentioned, testing some different games, that was one thing that really didn't gain much traction. And I think a lot of that just comes from the fact that the YouTube algorithm knows me as, doing primarily Arma content. And if I'm posting just a couple videos that are out there, I'm not going to get like a major following off of that or anything. So I need to be able to find something that I can stick to that has replayability. And that's why like alternate history and Total War, for example, that's something that I think would be really, really cool. Just do like 20 episodes or something like that. And then you have the series done, whatever. But since it didn't gain too much traction, that's something I noticed about 2019 that has led me to one of the goals for 2020. Another big thing for 2019 was losing my Milsim home. PSO was, at first, it was kind of frustrating and sad to not be there, but I am in a much better position now and far happier having, kind of left PSO and, kind of going out and, being with some different units and playing with them. So you're still going to see Milsim content on the channel, but because I'm not playing, every Saturday and Sunday, probably not going to be on the channel as much. And that's not something that I would say is really too much of a negative thing. I still want there to be Milsim because I enjoy Milsim, and I know that it's not necessarily always the most fun to watch. And another one of the goals that I had for 2019 was to stream more, and I stopped doing it for a couple reasons. One was just I have a very complicated streaming setup, more complicated than I think most people do. I've got like a streaming machine that everything that comes out of my PC goes to, and I had to set up software for the audio, and it gets really complicated. But the biggest streaming difficulty that I found, and I'd be interested if there's any other Arma YouTubers that are out there watching this, is it is very difficult to stream Milsim content because it's not as fun to watch. The way I kind of think of it is I enjoyed playing baseball, and I enjoy going to baseball games. But watching it on TV, it is boring for me. And I played baseball for a number of years. Like I know it in and out. My first YouTube channel was primarily baseball content, but I just cannot watch it on TV. And I feel like Milsim's the same way with streaming and maybe even to some degree watching it on YouTube. It's really fun being there in the moment. But in a mission, you might be holding a position and nothing happens for 20 minutes. When I watch that stuff on like Twitch or whatever, I leave. I go to watch something else, maybe try to find another Arma mission where there's action that's going on. But that hasn't, and I know that I'm making that content, and that's probably the same for a lot of people too. And so the amount of time that I was putting into streaming, specifically Milsim, and the amount of viewership that I was getting was really not that high at all. And again, I think it's just the nature of it. But don't get me wrong, I love Milsim. Like I said, it's fun to be able to play, but I think it's really tough to watch. Tell me if you think that is true. I try and edit my missions as much as possible whenever I post them here on YouTube to cut out the stuff that I think would, cause people to leave. I want you to see the action, but I also want there to be like a story that's taking place, fill you in on what's happening there and stuff. So, but yeah. So streaming, I definitely want to do a little bit more in 2020. May not necessarily be Arma. We'll have to wait and see what your guys' feedback is. I did a really cool stream last week with the Military and Veteran Gamers charity where, it was a Zeus mission that I was doing. That was a lot of fun. We raised, some good money for that particular charity. And I think that was a much more enjoyable experience than just being on the ground. So I don't know if I'll be Zeusing more or what that's necessarily going to be a part of, but that's been a pretty good partnership with MVG, and I'm hoping that over 2020 we'll be able to build more partnerships like that as well with different communities and stuff. Since I'm not with PSO anymore, that's a lot of time to be able to kind of interact with different groups, and we try a mission here or there with them, and stuff, and try and feature some of the other stuff that is out there in the community. Also want to try and do more to reach out to Bohemia Interactive, be a stronger partner with them, just because I've had a lot of good moments just kind of meeting people out of the community. I want to keep that going. But anyway, this has been, wow, I'm up to 21 minutes right now on kind of what 2019 was and what to expect in 2020. Remember, your guys' feedback is absolutely important. So even if it's not a question that I asked from you guys about, if streaming you felt was a challenge with Arma, if you like the way that the last couple alternate history series have gone, if there was any of the content besides Arma that you enjoyed watching, those questions and anything else that you would want to add, please put that in the comment section below. It really helps a lot. Oh yes, and the other thing was Patreon. What do you guys think would be a beneficial Patreon perk for helping support me? Anyway, you guys are awesome. You really are. Thank you. Even though that 2019 was kind of a I don't want to say a low point necessarily, but it was a rough year for the channel. I really have a lot of high hopes for 2020. I did want to be clear with you about some of the challenges in 2019, and I hope that didn't kind of be the theme for this particular episode. I really want to stress the positivity that I have going forward. I think that there's a lot of great opportunities. I want you guys to be involved in it, so please let me know in that comment section below. Anyway, thanks guys. I hope you guys all had a happy new year, great holiday, all of that. You guys are phenomenal people. You really are. Until next time, war is hell. You don't have to worry because warfighters, I got your six.